3 Amherst schools. The Amherst Training School. Amherst Training School, originally called the Amherst Negro School, was built as a 6-classroom wooden frame structure on School Street in Amherst, Virginia in 1921, with contributions from local families and businesses in the black community. Additional classrooms and 2 additional buildings, one a kitchen and lunchroom, the second, a classroom brick structure, were added over the years. Amherst Training School's elementary students were primarily from the town of Amherst. Additional students from 1- and 2-room black elementary schools in the northern half of Amherst County fed into the Amherst Training School for high school. There was no kindergarten and no 12th grade. The southern end of the county did not have a black high school until the Madison Heights School, serving grades 1 through 11, opened in 1939. When Central High School opened in 1956, all black high school students in the county went there. Amherst Training School continued to serve elementary students until Central Elementary School opened as an all-black consolidated Amherst County Elementary School in 1964. Although black students began being integrated into Amherst County's previously all-white schools on a very limited basis in 1963, full integration, court-ordered and enforced, did not come to Amherst County schools until 1969-70. Although most of the school was torn down, part of it is still in use today as the Amherst radio station.
Well, it was a frame building, and I knew it wasn't like the Amherst High School, which was brick. And I knew our building, we had a big potbelly stove, and we would take turns, adding the coal. And one day I hit it too hard, and it fell over. And so that was the last time, I had to do that chore. And so
this was a school that was built in the 30s for black students with funds raised by black patrons in the town of Amherst. And the school that I attended, as you can see, it's clapboard, was white, was added on the back, the side, up and down with a separate cafeteria.
From the 1st to the 7th grade, it was considered elementary, and from the 8th to the 11th, it was high school.
I was 6 years old when I went to the 1st grade, and I went from the 1st to the 7th grade at Amherst Training School.
Well, I finished in 1949, and so we just count back 11 years, and that will tell you.
I walked to school. We lived like a quarter of a mile from the school.
And can you tell me what you saw when you went to school?
Well, we lived on West Court Street, so we would cross the street and go through what was where Lou's Antique Mall is now. It used to be Howell's, a Man-Apply store, and Chester Rucker's shoe shop and all that. We would go between that and go down through it was a lady named Mrs. Diggs, and we'd go through her yard and into the schoolyard.
I was transported by bus.
And where did you live at that time, out here?
I live up on 610, which is called Public Creek Road. 610 off of 60 West.
And when you went in the bus, who was the bus driver?
Well, the bus driver, strange enough, was my father-in-law.
Well, I passed by, there were houses all lined up, and on the corner was a grocery store, and at the corner was a minister, and he would offer encouragement and say he would give me a nickel for every A or B that I got. You know, I don't know whether I ever collected, but it was, you know, it added to me wanting to do well.
We just saw, and we knew everybody, so we would be greeting people and going through. And in Mrs. Diggs' yard, she had a goose, and that was what we were afraid of, because that goose would come after you. And my sister used to be late all the time, and she would cry and cry and cry that she was afraid of Miss Diggs' goose, because the goose would get after you. And Miss Diggs would come out with a broom and chase the goose.
So that you
we
could go to
through.
school?
But we only had one class for each subject. We had one class for English, one class of senior English, which I taught. And I had 4 different sections, you know, had about 25 each time. And then we had one class for history, one class for science, one class for math. We had about 4 classes. The curriculum was very, very, I don't know how to say it. The curriculum was not sufficient, I don't think at all, because the kids only took math, English, science, and what's it?
History?
History. They only took 4 subjects. And home economics. They had home economics.
Well, I had nothing to compare it with, really. The teachers were dedicated, they were caring, they really wanted you to learn. You know, I can't compare textbooks because I didn't know what the other students, you know, white students had.
Reading, writing, arithmetic, English, literature, and as you went into the high school, you went into the science and chemistry. Yeah, one foreign language which was often, that was French.
They taught the chemistry and the biology, but there wasn't a lab where you could do experiments. And vocational guidance, we had a glee club, a chorus, but no music courses.
The school was sort of a family-oriented school, basically, and the teachers were more of a caring type of teachers. They considered each student as their potential in life, and they did the best that they could for those students.
Mrs. Jones was probably everybody's favorite because she was a mother, and at that time they were allowed to correct you. If you didn't do right, you got swatted on the hand with a ruler, and then you got a note to carry home to your mother, and you got swatted again.
Well, I'll tell you, I love children, and I'd love to see them. I like to see them learn. It just did me. It was a pleasure.
Well, I had several favorite teachers. Miss Jones was my cousin, so you know, my favorite because I've been coming to see her ever since she left, and she was a sweetheart. But I had a couple of other teachers that were favorite, and I didn't even go by to see them, the ones that are not deceased.
I would say my most favorite teacher was Maurice Moore, and the reason why, because he was the type of man who gave you an incentive to better yourself.
Most of the teachers I went with taught me the same thing that Miss Jones started out teaching. It's how to respect your fellow man, get along with everybody.
His whole thing was to give you the incentive to go out into the world and prove to the world that you could do whether they would give you the opportunity to do it or not. If you had it in your mind that you could do it and you showed the ability to do it, whether you were promoted into these positions, do the best that you could while you were at it, and then someday, maybe not in your generation, but someday it would be open and those who follow you would have a chance to prove themselves.
What made you want to go to college?
Well, I was, you know, and looking around, I knew that, as I indicated, they were bringing in a lot of young teachers, and even if they weren't on the payroll, we had Anderson was the principal then, who was on the diploma that I showed you. He brought in his niece and nephew who had just finished college, you know, and so that was an incentive. And you know, they were telling you about college life and that you could make it, and you know, and so that was quite an incentive, you know. And looking at them, and they weren't, you know, when say I'm 17 and they're 22, 23, you know.
Did you have any teams? Did you have?
Oh yeah, this was our ball field.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But down here?
Down here was you played mostly tennis ball, and this was at your recess. You got a recess 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. You had we have half hour for lunch or an hour for lunch. I forgot exactly which now. It was 12 to 12:30. No, I think it was 12 to 1. We had lunch, and then you had a 10 minute. This is elementary now, and then we had 10 minutes at I think around 10 o'clock, and we had around 2 o'clock we had a recess.
And we would have our special time, and the children would play on. I had a special place where the children would play.
Right.
And there was no equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's one of the things, if you wanted to know, I'd like to for them to have had equipment, you know, that they could enjoy. But you see, our equipment, I just thought of different games that I knew, different kind of games that probably they didn't always have, and I tried to teach them those games. And we used to do folk dances like the Germans and all those kind of like that. We do that kind of thing.
We used to play what you call this hopscotch. You know, you build, draw on it, and we used to play. I like that once in a while.
And the other, you just made up what was, because we only had the one field in the back. It wasn't too much back there. And they had a basketball tacked to a tree, but that was it. I never saw a baseball, football game or a basketball game until I went to college. And Evelyn, Jean, and I, we were classmates. We said we don't know what to. We were told that we would have to go out and root for the people. And we said, how do we know when to root?
Well, mostly school, we played dodgeball, you know. Yeah.
Dodgeball
and we had, at one point, it was outdoor basketball court. And then we had baseball, you know. So we'd do the baseball in the evenings, you know. And then...
Did you play it at the school primarily?
Yeah, my last couple of years we had a team, and so I became the manager and player, and so we had to provide our own transportation. And my buddy, he had I think it was like a 39 Dodge. And so all 9 people would get in that car, you know. Yeah. So I would say we didn't have a lunchroom. And so we would, you know, my mother had to fix our lunch, and then, but later on we got a lunchroom, and I forget what the cost was, 15, 25 cents or something per day, if that.
Now I'm a 2 meal a day person. I would eat breakfast before I leave home, and then I would eat when I got back home after I did my chores.
Most of the time we brought our lunch, and the only meals that were served there that I can remember was lunch. And we ate our breakfast before we came to school. And most of us brought our lunch, or they had a cafeteria in the back of the school where we could go and buy lunch. That's still standing today.
All right, see that window there? That's where they used to serve us from the kitchen through that little window, and it was a couple of tables right here. That bathtub wasn't in there, stuff like that. That's been done since then. But this is what it was.
I worked in the lunchroom. I enjoyed that because you got to get free lunch.
Uh-huh.
And you got to help clean up afterward, and snack a little bit on maybe pastries or something that was left afterward. We had a lady that she was a very good cook, and she made some wonderful desserts, like cobblers and stuff.
Do you remember her name?
Mrs. Jackson, she's passed on now, but she was a real good cook.
Do you think you learned any of the things that you have carried into your
I may
professional?
have. I used to admire her. I watched her. I watched her hands and the way she put things together. She probably did influence me.
I keep it with, I think, all of our classmates. And even some of the other people. And our class got along very well together. And one of the persons told me, since I've been back, that the principal used to tell them that they need to be like we were.
For those who attended and those who applied themselves to the best of our ability, we achieved many things.
Can you name some of the things that the people that you knew at Amherst Training School have gone on to do?
We had the first judge in the state of Virginia came out of Amherst Training School. One of the first black women to reach the rank of colonel came out of Amherst Training School.
Now is that Pastor Nelson?
That's Pastor Nelson. We have doctors that came out of Amherst Training School. We have lawyers that came out of Amherst Training School. We have people who have reached all different fields that came out of Amherst Training School. However, they were handicapped as they went forward in their education. Then we have some bums that came out of Amherst Training School. Everything that came out of Amherst Training School did not achieve, but there were many who made great things for themselves.
Well, my oldest brother graduated from Amherst Training School, and when he went to D.C. to become a medic, it was not on record that was a school. It was a training school. And
it wasn't a high school. It wasn't certified as a high school.
And they didn't want to give him the job because it wasn't certified as a high school, and they was trying to tell him that he didn't have the education.
Mm-hmm. And when you think when I think in terms of training school, we think in terms of Central Virginia Training School, or the fact that we go back to Tuskegee, and originally, it was the idea that you were going to train blacks to do these kinds of jobs that weren't necessarily in the academic realm.
Well, in my going around and listening to people, most of the black went to training school, whether it was Amherst Training School or Appomattox Training School or Rustburg Training School, because that's where they trained you. They were under the impression that we didn't have so much learning things, so we had to be trained.
So your children were at Amherst Training School at the time of integration?
Yes.
Would you mind sharing with us what were the experiences that your children had at the time of integration?
Well, the first thing, they had to go to Richmond to be approved that they were capable of entering Amherst Elementary School. They had to go before a board. And before they could go there, we had to have a written statement said they are capable of going to school there.
Looking back, we knew that it wasn't, a lot of the cases that had dictated that, Plessis versus Ferguson, separate but equal. We really didn't realize that it was unequal, at that time, although we could look and see a brick building and a frame building, steam heat, and a potbelly stove, and at one point outdoor toilets and that sort of thing.
Well, I drove before the school was integrated, and integration was a good thing. But I find that over the years, it's gradually getting back to where the first integration, everybody seemed to be, interact with each other and seem to accept each other. And now somehow or another there is some exception and there is some division there now, if you stop and look at it and pay close attention to it.
Well, now looking back now, I can't exactly wish that anything was different because I was happy when I was coming through there, and looking back now, I think the kids are fortunate. They got air conditioning, and we had to take coal in a skillet to keep the fire going.
And you have to put forth the effort wherever it is. If you got limitations, you have to do that and then go beyond that if you can. You shouldn't allow that to be a handicap, and realize that you can do just as well as somebody else, even though they may have some other thoughts about you.
I want to tell them that they have an opportunity that I did not have. They have a lot offered to them that I did not have. And I wish that they would take every advantage and every opportunity they have to excel and do way more than I have.
If you're there to learn, no matter where you are, if you really want to learn, no matter where you are, with one group, if you're with that group, or if you're with another group, if it's all black or all white or mixed up, if you're there to learn, you'll get it.